Okay, in this lesson we're covering topic 2.2, which is water. All right, here are our syllabus points. There's not a lot of them this time, but still very important. Okay, water is not organic. Remembering that organic compounds have carbon in them, all right? It is not organic, but it is extremely important for every living thing to function, all right? It has a lot of functions, including dissolving things, and it kind of centers around that dissolving things. Once things are dissolved, they can be transported, they can be removed as waste. All those kinds of things rely on it. It's a liquid in our body, so it moves around and gives a bit of flexibility as well. Up to 60% of the human body consists of water, which is quite a lot. All right, so it has some very interesting molecular properties that we need to understand, because if we understand its properties, we can understand how it does what it does. So number one, this is our water molecule. It's a Mickey Mouse looking thing. It's got the big oxygen in the middle and the two hydrogens covalently bonded to it. So that's our H2O. There are two H's and one O. And the size of the oxygen nucleus does mean something very important. And what it does is it makes the molecule polar. Okay, and by polar, or sometimes known as polarity, the polarity means that the electrons in the hydrogen here are actually much more prone to move towards the oxygen because it's bigger. So they're attracted to it. It moves them all down there, which gives that oxygen a little bit of a slight negative charge. And it does mean that the Mickey Mouse ears up here have a bit of a positive charge, okay? And that polarity, or that difference in charge at the different poles, right, North Pole, South Pole, they cause a lot of the features of what water can do. And one of it is, you might actually see it drawn like that, and those four little dots are to indicate that the electrons are up at that point. It does, because it's polar, allow ionic substances or things with a positive or negative charge to dissolve into it, okay? Think about sodium chloride in water. Once that sodium chloride goes in, the sodium and the chloride actually snap apart, and one of them is positively charged, one of them is negatively charged, so it can be attracted to different parts of the water molecule depending on what their charge is. Water molecules, because they are charged, are also attracted to one another, okay? And that's an important point there. And they're attracted to each other with hydrogen bonds, or they're also known as dipole-dipole forces. They are really weak intermolecular forces, so that between molecules, but they do actually give some interesting features here. So because they all stick together, they can do a lot of things. Here are some four main properties of water. It has cohesive properties, adhesive properties, solvent, and thermal properties. So we're going to start with cohesive. Cohesive means that the water molecules stick together, and the polarity assists this, right? If one end's positive and one end's negative, they're obviously going to be attracted to that opposite charge in another water molecule. Gives it some features like surface tension. Surface tension is something you'll see if you've ever tried to load up a coin or something with a little bubble of water and it doesn't quite spill over. That's that surface tension there. Putting something like liquid detergent in there removes surface tension. All right, so this is a really useful feature in plants, in really large tall plants, if you need to get water up from the roots all the way up to the top of the tree. In the xylem in a plant, so the water carrying tubes, it can allow the water molecules to drag each other up, and it's called capillary action, and it works against gravity, okay? Because those molecules stick together, helps them move upwards in the plant. All right, its adhesive properties means that water molecules stick to other things, right? So here's that cohesion. They stick together in cohesion, but it's the adhesion where they stick to other things. And in particular, they stick to other polar things or charged molecules, right? Because they can do that, they can kind of stick to plant leaves. They won't dry out. All right, water has definitely got solvent properties, and again, we come back to that polarity. Because they have different charges at each different part of the molecule, it can attract those charged ions, separate them, and then dissolve them, and that just means we're separating them out. So again, here's our chloride and sodium, so our table salt example. Sodium has a positive charge, so it's going to be attracted to the negative part there, which is the oxygen, and the exact opposite is happening over here with the negative chloride. Now, that's important because in the cytoplasm of cells, we've got to be able to, say, dissolve the same things, salts and sugars. In blood, same thing. You've got your blood glucose. It needs to dissolve into your blood. It needs to transport around your body, and your urine as well. It's got to be able to dissolve those wastes so we can remove them in an effective way. Otherwise, if you don't have enough water there to dissolve them, you get things like kidney stones. All right, thermal properties of water are really, really important. So I need you to be on the ball with this one. Number one, it has a high heat capacity. What that means is that it takes a hell of a lot of energy to increase the temperature of water, even 1 degree. So hydrogen bonds, or those bonds between the molecules, are really restrict the movement. So every energy increase in the temperature is a lot compared to some other chemicals, which means the flip side, to cool it down, it has to lose a lot of energy. What that does is it means it's quite a stable temperature. It's hard to change. It takes a lot of energy to heat that water up or cool it down. So that's actually good for biological organisms, because it means that if you live in water, that water is going to be generally quite a stable temperature. Now, it has a high latent heat of vaporization. What that means, again, it's about how those things stick together and the energy needed to increase the temperature. If the water is liquid, like in this picture here, it needs a hell of a lot of energy to escape it and start to become that gas, right? We know when water boils at 100 degrees, it becomes that gas and becomes that water vapor. So in order to do that, hell of a lot more energy, but when it moves off into that vapor, it takes energy with it. So the good thing about that is if you are sweating, the water that is evaporating off your skin is actually taking that heat energy with you, and that's why sweating should cool you down. All right, our last important thermal point there is that it has a high boiling point. Again, we've talked about this a couple of times now. It needs a lot of energy to push it up. Its boiling point is 100, so that means that it has quite a large range where it is liquid, and that's sort of the best place for organisms to be able to access that water. So it's got a 100-degree range where it's accessible, and therefore it can be found in pretty much every single habitat. Well, every habitat. If something's living there, it needs water. Right, so if we compare it to another chemical and put it into context, H2O versus methane. Right, so polar versus non-polar, so probably not a very good solvent here. Freezing point of 0, boiling point of 100, whereas if you compare these ones, it's only got a range here of 22 degrees, not very much at all. So it's not accessible as a liquid for very much of the time. And you can see it's already a really low boiling point, so it's a gas most of the time. This here is a bit different. This is how much energy is required to push it up 1 degree. And it needs 4.2 joules of energy to increase it 1 degree. This one only needs 2, so it doesn't take much to heat up methane, but it does take a lot to heat up water. Right, we need to talk about how other molecules and atoms interact with water, and we've talked about hydrophilic and hydrophobic before in topic 1. It's important to understand that hydrophilic properties of things mean they are dissolvable in water. Okay, they are charged particles, the positives or the negative charges, which again works in well with the polarity of the water, and the water can adhere to it. However, if something is hydrophobic, it's insoluble. It won't dissolve. It is non-polar, will have no charge, and we need to make a really good distinction here. We're used to saying that hydrophobic is like water fearing or water hating, but it's not necessarily the case. Sometimes hydrophobic molecules are just not necessarily water fearing. It's just that the water would rather stick to each other than worry about the other molecules. So what happens is that other thing trying to dissolve in the water just clumps together while the water molecules go off and play together. All right, so the water molecules are more attracted to one another than that other substance trying to dissolve. Right, so that's our water topic all sorted. So can you please have a read through all of these points so you can make sure you are on top of them all.